Right, so you might have been thinking to yourself, those arrest warrants that the International Criminal Court Chief Prosecutor Karim had applied for a little while ago, they're taking a little bit of time to materialise, aren't they? Well, it looks like the UK government has stepped in with an attempt to block the issuing of these warrants by questioning the legality of the matter, by questioning whether the ICC actually has jurisdiction here. And unfortunately, the ICC judge presiding over this case has decided to allow the UK to present evidence to try and make its case, which seems like one heck of a stretch to me, but it does go a long way to underline just how far this current government of ours here in the UK will go to try and get Israel off the hook, despite them meting out getting on for 10 months of genocide in Gaza. Right, so the UK government, into its almost certain last week of existence, in its current form anyway, has deployed its lawyers to try and save the bacon of Benjamin Netanyahu and his Defence Secretary Yoav Gallant, following the Chief Prosecutor for the International Criminal Court, Karim, himself British, applying for arrest warrants against the two men, accusing them both of war crimes and crimes against humanity. And we've only just got wind of this, despite the government issuing its claim to the court apparently back on the 10th of this month, and despite having until the 12th of July to do so. The thing is, they've got the pesky matter of a general election that the Conservative Party are almost certain to lose on the 4th of July. But that will now delay the issuing of these arrest warrants, should the UK petition fail, by at least a month. We've in fact only got wind of this application made in secret because the election is coming, so in light of that the court has unsealed the application now in order to ensure it gets heard. Having been made, it must be heard, but the current government must still technically be in power, I presume, for the application to retain any semblance of validity. Now, to my mind, the legal challenge from the UK has problems, but this is what UK lawyers are attempting to present. The UK lawyers are essentially questioning whether the ICC can issue arrest warrants to Israelis, on one hand, since Israel is not a signatory to the Rome Statute, the foundational documents of the International Criminal Court, what they're founded on, by agreeing to be bound to the statute should become subject to the jurisdiction of the ICC. But also there's the matter of the Oslo Accords. Now these are a set of agreements basically mediated by Norway, hence the name, back in the 90s, between Israel and the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, aimed, it was hoped, to result in a two-state solution eventually, whereby the PLO would recognise Israel and Israel would recognise the PLO as representatives of the Palestinian people. It led to the establishment of the Palestinian Authority, which operates self-rule to an extent, over some 40% of the West Bank, areas that Israel call Areas A and B, whereas they have control over the remaining 60% called Area C, which has been in the news lately, and I covered it in another video, because Israel's hard-right finance minister Bezalel Smotrich has now taken powers to build new illegal settlements in Area C, but that's all contained in another video. Essentially, it gave Palestinians a semblance of self-rule over 40% of the West Bank. You will note they have no authority in Gaza, although Gaza is referred to in the Oslo Accords because Gaza came to be run by a Hamas government elected back in 2006. My impression here, and I'm no legal expert at all, let alone international humanitarian law, is that if what Israel had been doing over the last 10 months nearly had been happening in the West Bank, and indeed we have been seeing atrocities occurring there, then the argument made by UK lawyers might actually be stronger. But since the case Karim and his team have put together, which has not been rushed, he's come in for some flack, not least by me, for how long he seemed to be taking to make any moves whatsoever to prosecute anyone involved, anybody in Israel, anyone in their government. Whereas the International Court of Justice, of course, also based in The Hague, was hearing a lot of cases brought before it in relation to the genocide in Gaza, not least that brought by South Africa against Israel. But matter of jurisdiction has been the reason why Khan has been taking his time. That had to be proven, because although Israel are not signed up to the Rome Statutes, Palestine is. And with the backing of international humanitarian law experts, including some from the UK as well, another who had been involved notably was Amal Clooney, Khan believes the case for jurisdiction has now been proven because Israel, although not signatories to the ICC, are attacking part of a state that is the state of Palestine and are attacking within it. And frankly, if that doesn't give a court jurisdiction to prosecute the aggressors, whoever they are, what does exactly? Frankly, if the ICC rules against its own chief prosecutor and with the UK lawyers trying to save Netanyahu and Gallant, what is the point then of the ICC? What is the point of being a member of them if that doesn't protect you in any way from people or entities, whether they are members or not. Essentially, it would be putting Israel above international law and giving them carte blanche to pretty much attack an ICC member state, knowing the ICC can't prosecute them because precedent will then have been set. And that is a stupendously stupid position to end up in, surely. And all to save the reputations of two genocidal maniacs. Coming to the matter of Gaza specifically, though, as opposed to those self-running areas of the West Bank, in 2021, a pre-trial chamber of the ICC did decide that the court's jurisdiction did extend to Gaza, which should really be the end of the argument, therefore. You should defer to that precedent. The signatories to the ICC were the Palestinian Authority and not Hamas, but it is on the matter of those Oslo Accords that the UK are clinging to, that they say excuses Israel and demonstrates that the ICC has no jurisdiction. And although those accords only apply to Israel and Palestine, the precedent would be set to excuse Israeli atrocity elsewhere. Personally, I cannot see how the Oslo Accords trump the Rome Statutes, because surely where the jurisdiction of the ICC comes under question, nothing trumps the foundational documents the court itself is built on. Palestine as a signatory, with jurisdiction over Gaza proven, should be enough. And the fact the ICC issues an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin when Russia is also not a signatory to the ICC, for the forced deportation, the war crime of forced displacement of children from Ukraine, who are signatories, into the Russian Federation, who are not, how is this situation different, therefore, than the example of the West hates the oppressor in that instance, but when it comes to Israel, the West is on the side of the oppressor? With the US under Biden, for now anyway, after his performance the other night, even threatening sanctions against the ICC for literally doing its job. Though of course the US are not signatories to the ICC either. Frankly, it is in my view an acknowledgement of being a global pariah and complete wrong-un to not be a signatory of the ICC. What is it exactly about being held to international law are some states so afraid of, if you are a just and moral government after all? Well, the ICC established jurisdiction in Palestine already. It has established that this covers Gaza already. So why let the UK put them under legal pressure by allowing this questioning of the legality take place? Is it really the UK putting them under pressure, or the US using the UK as a proxy? Does the ICC just want to make sure it's got all its I's dotted and its T's crossed? Let's face it, when the US says jump, our politicians always go how high after all. But when the matter of that Putin arrest warrant, as an example that can be pointed to in such similar context, for Israel to be let off the hook here would be catastrophically damaging to the reputation of the court. It would be seen as if the court being lent on enough to let Israel off the hook, and would be yet one more example of Western-backed pressure for its allies winning out. Functionally, the organisation would be rendered utterly pointless if it cannot stand up for its own member states in the face of pressure from a non-member state, as many believe the US are driving this via the UK, who are Rome Statute signatories themselves, the UK are, and in which case we'll be putting the so-called special relationship ahead of legally binding responsibilities they are signed up to. Our UK governments, time after time, really are global pariahs, aren't they? They are an embarrassment to me, and although Labour saying they would follow any legal advice on the matters of Israeli arms sales and want to examine the legal advice the Tories claim to be following but refuse to make public or share even with other parties, nothing suspicious about that whatsoever, of course. Who would believe Labour on this, given who they are led by, and why should it take a piece of legal advice to reach such a decision anyway, when we've literally seen what Israel have been doing in Gaza for nearly 10 months now, that has been grossly over the top, disproportionate, has been a genocide against mostly civilians and mostly women and children? Why do we need to wait for legal advice when we can see what is happening with our own eyes across social media every single day? Video, photos, cameras, they don't lie. The ICC Chief Prosecutor wishes to mount a prosecution case against two men who have been seen to be drivers of the genocide in Gaza, have committed war crimes of driving a strategy of starvation, and should answer for this in The Hague on the charges they face. It should not be for a signatory country like the UK to the ICC to mount a legal challenge against them in order to excuse the actions of leaders of a non-signatory state like Israel, who have committed atrocity against a fellow signatory state in Palestine. Even if the UK refuses to recognise Palestinian statehood itself, it is legally recognised by the ICC, so that's a moot point. The UK, therefore, are absolutely disgracing themselves, that they should be Believably doing so on behalf of US and Israeli lobbying doubles that disgrace. But ultimately, if there is any justice, if due process is carried out properly, I cannot by any stretch, and especially with that precedent set with that arrest warrant against Putin, see how the ICC can possibly rule in the favour of this UK legal challenge. If it does, then the ICC is probably finished, as Israel once more gets placed on a pedestal and treated differently to every other nation on the planet. Meanwhile, Israel is now planning to take over the West Bank with those new powers awarded to Bezalel Smotrich. He's now planning another 5 illegal settlements, which has begged the question from Francesca Albanese in the last 24 hours, the UN Special Rapporteur for the occupied Palestinian territories, as to why an arrest warrant is not being pursued against Smotrich as well. Well, indeed, I agree with her, but you can find out the details of his latest plot in this video recommendation here, with these new powers he now has, all done with Netanyahu's support, of course, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.